Hello and welcome. I am Vinaya Deshpande and you're watching CNN News 18. The wait for 5G in India is finally over. The wait for 5G in India is finally over. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will launch 5G services at the 6th edition of Indian Mobile Congress event at 10 a.m. today at Delhi's Pragati Maidan. 5G technology promises to offer seamless coverage, high-rate data, low latency and reliable communications to mobile users. Metro cities like New Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata and Chennai will be the first to get the 5G services. Other cities such as Ahmedabad, Bengaluru, Lucknow, Chandigarh, Hyderabad and Gurugram will get it sometime later. Several telecom giants took part in the mega auction for spectrum that concluded on August 1. Reliance Jio was the top bidder, offering a cumulative bid of 88,000 crore rupees for 24,740 megahertz of airwaves across 5 bands. Now moving on, the latest in the Chitradurga Muruga Mutt case. Various leaders of the Veera Shaiva Lingayat community on Thursday urged a change in the leadership of the 400-year-old mutt by seeking the ouster of Shivamurti Muruga Sharanaru. This comes after Shivamurti was arrested for alleged sexual abuse of 2 minors. The meeting was held under the leadership of the former MLA H. Ekanathayya, who has decided to approach the government seeking the appointment of a new seer. But as the meeting began, there was a commotion with pro-seer devotees clashing with some devotees who wanted to change. Some of the pro-seer leaders even walked away from the meeting.
ತಮಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿರೋ ಹಾಗೆ ಈಗ ಪ್ರಸಕ್ತ ಪೀಠಾಧೀಶರು ತಮ್ಮ ಕರ್ತವ್ಯಗಳನ್ನು ನಿರ್ವಹಿಸಲು ಸಾಧ್ಯವಾಗದಿರುವಂಥ ಒಂದು ಪರಿಸ್ಥಿತಿ ಇದೆ. ಈಗ ಅವರು ಬಂಧನಕ್ಕೆ ಒಳಗಾಗಿ ನ್ಯಾಯಾಂಗ ಕೃಷಿಯಲ್ಲಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅದರಿಂದಾಗಿ ಮಠದ ಧಾರ್ಮಿಕ ಮತ್ತು ಆಡಳಿತಾತ್ಮಕ ಚಟುವಟಿಕೆಗಳು ನಡೀತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಅಧಿಕಾರಯುತವಾಗಿ ನಡೀತಿಲ್ಲ. ಯಾರೋ ಬರೋದಲ್ಲ, ಯಾರೋ ಪೂಜೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅಲ್ಲ. ಪೀಠಾಧ್ಯಕ್ಷರಾಗಿ ಅವರ ಕರ್ತವ್ಯ ನಿರ್ವಹಿಸಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಪೀಠಾಧ್ಯಕ್ಷರ ಹಾಜರಿ ಅವಶ್ಯಕ. ಅದರಿಂದಾಗಿ ಇಂಥ ಒಂದು ಸಂದಿಗ್ಧ ಪರಿಸ್ಥಿತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಹೊಸ ಪೀಠಾಧ್ಯಕ್ಷರನ್ನ ನೇಮಕ ಮಾಡೋದು ಅತ್ಯಂತ ಅವಶ್ಯಕ.
Now moving on, in a significant development in the Jubilee Hill gang rape case, the Juvenile Justice Board in Hyderabad pronounced that the 4 minors charged with gang rape can be tried as adults. The board said that this is because the alleged offences against them are heinous in nature and 4 of the 5 juveniles were aged between 16 and 18 years at the time of the incident. Meanwhile, the 5th accused, the son of an AIMIM MLA, will still be treated as a minor. Remember, the gang rape happened on May 28th this year and a total of 6 accused were booked in the case, including 5 juveniles and an adult named Saduddin Malik.
Shameless and transparent effort by Russia to annex parts of the neighbor Ukraine. The United States, I want to be very clear about this, the United States will never recognize Russia's claims on Ukraine's sovereign territory.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has formally signed accession of treaties formalizing the takeover of 4 Ukrainian territories: Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson and Zaporizhia. With the latest move, Putin has proclaimed Russian rule over 15% of Ukraine, a claim that has received outright rejection from the Western countries. Soon after annexation, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that his country is submitting an accelerated application to join the NATO military alliance. Meanwhile, the United States adopted even more sanctions after the Kremlin announced formal annexation of 4 Ukrainian regions. The sanctions, targeting hundreds of people and companies, including those in Russia's military-industrial complex and lawmakers.
Ties was passed through generations. People brought through years this feeling to Russia, and nobody can destroy this feeling. This is why older people and young people, those who were born after the collapse of the Soviet Union, voted for our joint future in 1991 in Belovezhsk Pushcha. The representatives of the party elites made a decision, and people ended up torn apart. It became a national catastrophe, same as some time ago after the revolution. The republics were cut artificially.
And we're fully prepared to defend it. I want to say this again. America is fully prepared with our NATO allies to defend every single inch of NATO territory. Every single inch. So, Mr. Putin, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. Every inch. And I've been in close touch with our allies. We're announcing new sanctions today as well.
Now there's some breaking news that's coming in. India abstains from the UN vote that condemns Russia's annexation of Ukrainian regions. New Delhi stressed that dialogue is the only answer to settling differences and disputes. Let's listen in to what Ruchira Kamboj had to say.
India is deeply disturbed by the recent turn of developments in Ukraine. We've always advocated that no solution can ever be arrived at the cost of human lives. We urge that all efforts are made by concerned sides for the immediate cessation of violence and hostilities. Dialogue is the only answer to settling differences and disputes, however daunting that may appear at this moment. The path to peace requires us to keep all channels of diplomacy open. India's Prime Minister has unequivocally conveyed this in his discussions with world leaders, including with the presidents of the Russian Federation and Ukraine. So has our External Affairs Minister in his recent engagements at the General Assembly last week. India's Prime Minister has also emphasized that this cannot be an era of war. We therefore sincerely hope for an early resumption of peace talks to bring about an immediate ceasefire and resolution of the conflict. India's position has been clear and consistent from the very beginning of this conflict. The global order is anchored on the principles of the UN Charter, international law, and respect for sovereignty and the territorial integrity of all states. Escalation of rhetoric or tension is in no one's interest. It is important that pathways are found for a return to the negotiating table. Keeping in view the totality of the evolving situation, India decided to abstain on the resolution.
Now, to give us more perspective on the story, I'm being joined by Abhishek Jha on the phone line. Abhishek, that's a big message coming in from India.
Of course, and India has always maintained on this issue of Russia-Ukraine conflict that cessation of hostilities and returning to dialogue could be the only way forward to mitigate the crisis and bring back the peace in this conflicted region. With the yesterday night's resolution that has happened, that was brought and which also tried to condemn Russia, India had abstained, and not only India, there were 4 abstentions on this resolution. India, China, Brazil, and Gabon, they had abstained on this, and 10 members of the United Nations voted in favor of this resolution. But with this divided mandate, this is clear that there is still scope of dialogue. There are parties, there are countries who are trying to support dialogue to cease fire and to cease hostilities in a way that can bring back peace in this conflicted region of Russia and Ukraine.
Thank you for that information, Abhishek. Now, moving on, CNN News 18's managing editor Zaka Jacob spoke to a panel of guests on Russian President Vladimir Putin announcing formal integration of 4 provinces of Ukraine into Russia. Let's listen in.
Why should the rest of the world accept this? I mean, this is, as for all practical purposes, a land grab exercise after a sham referendum.
Well, the world is not accepting it, that we know it already. But does it matter to Putin? No. He doesn't care at this stage. He has obtained whatever purpose he thought was going to be served by annexing these 4 regions, which he had done earlier, like Crimea. So in a way, he has formalized his annexation of the Russian-speaking part into Russia. Most importantly, today's exercise was targeted at the Russian audiences, basically for the domestic purpose. Essentially, he was not conciliatory at all, and in fact, rather confrontational with the West, because he said that this deception that has, or deceit and deception that with regard to expansion of NATO that the Americans have perpetrated all along is something that he accused them of. So therefore, he doesn't care whether the world accepts it or does not accept it. He feels that self-determination is a part of the UN Charter, and that's why they want to go ahead. But at the moment, I think, in order to salvage his reputation as well as to continue to carry on is what he's trying to do.
I think there's a big shift occurring in nations are going to prosecute war. And this referendums and hasty annexation is part of that. I mean, it is an extraordinary thing to annex territories to hold these referendums. Well, they're still contested on the battlefield. I mean, these are active war zones, all 4 of these regions. And that signals something. And I'm not sure that it's the desperation some commentators are saying, because the partial mobilization, or the mobilization, if that's what it is working. I mean, yes, we see these scenes, people crowding around border exits and buying tickets, but we also see scenes of voinkomats, the recruitment centers, filled with people coming in and answering the call-up. I don't think Russia is on its last leg, the way some people are saying. I'm not advocating this, I'm just observing that the winter is coming. Russia will train up these troops and have more or less double its forces in Ukraine, and also probably change their tactics, go after infrastructure much more. So I think that this is part of a plan to do the war after it faltered.
I think that what Russia has done now is an exercise just in raw imperialism. It's the worst violation of the UN Charter since its founding. I was very happy to hear Minister Jaishankar, when he was here this past week, that India stood on the side of respecting the UN Charter and its principles. Also, Prime Minister Modi, of course, has said that this is not an era of war. It's an era for democracy. negotiation diplomacy. That having been said, the question is now, what is it these two great democracies, India and the United States, can do to change the dynamic of this rawism of Russia? The United States, as you know, has announced new sanctions on 1,000 different citizens of Russia, including the central banker.
Okay.
India has said that it's not so sure about sanctions, but the question is, if India is not sure about sanctions, what is it going to do to defend its principles? It seems to me, unless Putin can find support from China and India, that eventually his economy will do the same thing the Soviet Union economy did, and that was it will implode. What really bothers me, of course, is that this is going to be used as a pretext for the use of nuclear weapons. I don't think that the way forward is by decisive military victory by either side. I think that Prime Minister Modi is exactly right. It's a time for democracy, diplomacy, and negotiation. The question is, in view of these latest imperialistic moves, trying to restore the greatness of Russia. I guess Putin thinks he's Putin the Great or something like that. How do you get to that point? The way in which the United States is trying to get to that point is, one, by giving the Ukrainians enough weapons to be able to defend themselves, and second, by going the sanctions route and trying to use economic measures to be able to force the change. Now, sure, Putin wants to bleed the West, but he's bleeding too, not only in deaths of his troops, but as you saw, there are tens of thousands of Russians of military age who are fleeing the country now. They don't want to be able to fight for this. So he's got problems. He thinks he's just going to bleed us.